All right, so we're going to do some shading of form. So hopefully you've already watched the quick video I did on basic shading techniques. So we're going to shade a couple of cylinders, one with a tight radius. So I'm not being as careful with these cylinders, I guess, as I am sometimes, because mostly this is going to be just getting shaded. But there you go. I got my ellipse set. Hopefully it's more or less correct. And then let's see, tight cylinder, wider cylinder. Maybe I'll make this one even wider. Yeah. And oh yeah, I was going to do a box too. Something like that. All right. So I was having a shadow for the ellipse, for the sphere, it would come down, like the light would be something like this, and then I'd have an ellipse there. Guess I didn't really give myself room for shadows there. I'll cover the shadows some other time, maybe on the tone paper. All right, so that's going to be where the light is cutting this. Is where the light's going to be cutting this. So that'll be the dark. That's the dark, light, dark, dark, light. I'll this be the dark side. That'll be the shadow. When the light cuts the sphere, it's going to be ellipse, right? So if I took a knife and cut it, there'd be an ellipse there. But I'm not cutting it except with light, so that we just see this part of the ellipse. The other part we wouldn't see unless it was backlit, meaning that the light was on the far side of the object, in which case it would go up like this and have less light than dark. But we're going to have more light than dark like that. All right, so I'm going to put back my 2H pencil and start with my 2B. So I'm going to think about that transition here, trying to maintain that half ellipse. Hold my hand so you can see what I'm doing. So the core shadow is going to be showing that contour, that 3D contour. And this is the shadow side that receives a little bit of reflected light. So between the effect of having the shadow edge right by the light side, this band seems a little bit darker. Plus, it doesn't receive as much reflected light as out here. Now, this part wouldn't receive a lot of reflected light either because it's down close to the shadow. So this is where we cheat a little bit and try to maintain this contrast between the cast shadow and the shadow side. So here's a little of that circular scribbly kind of shading, interlocking circles. Trying to not maintain that ellipse right in here. Trying to maintain this ellipse. Sort of make it a little bit fuzzy and less dark out here. Make it darkest, the cast shadow right there. Make the darkest part of the core shadow where it'd be visually closest to the viewer. If I want to mess with halftone, I could put in some here, so the highlight would be there. So when you're shading, you want to try to think about those 3D contours that we did, that wireframe, and try to not fight the form, meaning that if you don't get it perfectly smooth, whatever's left would be at least following the form like those 3D contours would be. Reinforce my edge a little bit. switch over to a darker pencil. I'm left-handed, so I've started on the right side of the paper so I don't drag my hand through it as much as I otherwise would. And then another little rule of thumb is if you are shading on the light side, the darkest part on the light side should still be lighter than the lightest part on the shadow side. It's a little bit different on the toned paper, but that's the general idea. Just to create that clear separation between what's in the shadow and what's on the light side. So I'm using a little circle technique to kind of fill in a little bit. So I tend to start with the big linear shading style and then switch over to little circles for kind of developing and fine-tuning the shading. All right, that's all I need for this assignment as far as the sphere part goes. On the white paper, we'll do it again on the toned. Let's switch over back over to a 2B, I think. All right. So for this, so this is going to be the bigger diameter, and this is the smaller one. So this should have a fuzzier transition or edge from the dark to the light. Here, I'll start with the core shadow again. It kind of helps establish the contour, a little bit of gradient, and then on the edge here, put a little tone and gradient there again, just to try to turn the form. Turn the form meaning try to communicate the idea that this is wrapping around. Do that also with this ellipse, just making sure I don't get it too pointy there. Nice and curved right at the edges to, again, communicate that idea that this is going behind. All right, let's get there. Switch over to, where's my lamp? There it is. All right. So again, this is because it's a bigger radius than the other one. I want to really make sure that this one more of a, the gradient just takes up more space this way. It's a little bit fuzzier to communicate that idea. All right, let's move over to this cylinder now. It should have a narrower transition or fuzz to help communicate the idea that it's a smaller diameter cylinder. So I got my core shadow here. And then a little bit of more tone right here at the edge to help turn the form on the shadow side. That ellipse in there. Something like that. And then the shadow, because that's the cutting edge. If there's a cast shadow, it would be right tangent with that. Right, and if I want 3D, it would be right there. And then it would go back in the same direction that the light's coming from. This too. Here's our box. So I could start the gradation there or there. I have a tendency of starting there because I'm left-handed, but for contrast, it would actually probably be best to do it in this corner. So what this is going to do is give you the most contrast with those whites for the 1 and 2, or the top and the bottom side that I'm going to have in the light. Using the side of the pencil, trying to avoid distinct pencil lines. Trying to make a nice gradation because light generally has fall off, so it kind of fades out. Make sure there's a nice dark line there to apply that little bit of a shadow crack between the object and its place on the surface of whatever it's sitting on. Now, since this is in light, I don't want to do a lot of shading here, but what I could do is I could put just a little bit of halftone. Halftone is what they call the tone that's on the light side. Just sort of start at light and then just sort of fade it out once it gets across. And that way I can maybe get away from having to put an actual like dark line right there. Another thing you can do is if you got a background or something like that, you can reverse out the light side. Sometimes that's a useful way of getting away from having to use a line to separate out some things.